The Federal Inland Revenue Service says it has appealed the judgment of the Federal High Court in Rivers State, which directs the state governments to collect value-added tax and income taxes. The service says collection of VAT in states will not work as it involves an input and output mechanism. Helena Samide-Akins reports.
The Federal High Court in Port Harcourt had issued an order restraining the Federal Inland Revenue Service from collecting value-added tax and personal income tax in Rivers State. In its ruling, the court directed the Rivers State Govt to take charge of the collection. Rivers State Govt had filed a case against the FIRS and the Attorney General of the Federation over demands, threats and intimidation of the state residents to pay PIT and VAT by the tax agency. Feeding questions from journalists in Abuja, the service says it is not keeping quiet over the matter as it has approached a higher court. It explains that the act establishing the FIRS empowers the service to carry out the task. It urges that if states are saddled with the responsibility of collecting VAT, this will lead to businesses being shortchanged and cause taxpayers to pay double.
Sokoto State charges VAT, let's say, at 5%. And so, at the point of procuring the goods, this guy will have paid VAT at 10%. But when he's going to sell, it will only charge VAT at 5%. As such, the input suffered is greater than the output. Then the question is, who bears the shortfall of 5%?
The service also distances itself from reports making the round that FIRS is seeking to impose taxes on social media activities.
I am hearing this for the first time. I am not aware that FIRS has presented any bill to the National Assembly to request for any social media tax. And I can tell you on behalf of my executive chairman very clearly, this is not from us.
The reports claim that the FIRS made a proposal to this effect while appearing before the Senate Joint Committees working on the medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper. Helena Samide-Akins, TVC News, Abuja.
Well, joining me for this conversation is Public Affairs Analyst Adeni Kunu. Good morning. Thank you for joining us in TVC Breakfast.
Thank you and for having me this morning. Yes,
right.
Please.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Now, until now, the FIRS had been saddled with the responsibility of collecting taxes on behalf of the 36 states of the Federation, if I may put that word. And now we're beginning to see some controversy, around that responsibility. And I'm wondering what really is the issue here that you're seeing playing out between the federal government and the state?
It's the fact that the states have decided to put their destinies in their hands and actually leverage the provisions of the law to get what is due to them. I listened to the press conference of Mr. Matthew Bonjubola, and I did not hear him for a moment refer to the provisions of the Constitution that empowers the states and disempowers the federal government. It was citing incidences of paying certain amounts of money at some point and paying double at the other, but the position of the law is germane in this conversation. For the records, Lagos has had such battle with the federal government regarding the collection of, the same VAT that's a couple of years ago. And Lagos State took the federal government to the cleaners such that it could have it. But what Lagos did not proceed to do then was to actually enact a law to back its position. It felt comfortable with the verdict of the court. And I think that it's also one way to push for a properly federated system. We've been having conversations around, more powers to the states such that the states will not continue to take their begging bowls to Abuja. Many of us that actually have been on this side of the divide have continually condemned the fact that states are not viable. And I think that if we must talk about that aspect of states becoming financially capable of handling their responsibilities, then one of the things we must look at is this. Imagine you collect 85% or 100% tax, I beg your pardon. 15% stays with the federal government, 55% goes to the states, and 30% goes to the local government. And one of the things that also is a skewed arrangement is to understand the aspect of the ethical structure of our social components. Lagos has a lot of breweries. Ogun State has a lot of breweries. Rivers State also has breweries. Up north, such things as alcoholic beverages are not consumed.
Absolutely.
Then it becomes very illogical that a state that doesn't consume alcohol is benefiting from the tax. It doesn't make sense anywhere. Democracy is modeled after that of the US. Let me also mention Switzerland and Canada. There is nothing as the federal government of these countries that I've mentioned collecting such things as VAT because there's consumption taxes there.
Right.
Then if you also look at it, when we talk about fiscal federalism, as a matter of fact, I think that the local government should also take, the local governments across the country should also take the federal governments to court in certain areas so that they can clarify. Let's look at maritime businesses. Many local government areas are not practically existing in terms of infrastructure, and most of the waterways go through their area. The taxes that accrue to the federal government rightly should be going to the local government in certain maritime businesses, but that's another interpretation that we'll put for a day forward. So I need to say this, that it's time for the government, federal government, to understand that in a properly federated structures and the Constitution as we have it, even if I'm not very comfortable with certain provisions of the Constitution, but it is the document we have and we're making use of, it should respect it, because that is the way to go.
So you mentioned something talking about that the states are taking the responsibility of perhaps their lives into their hands. And you talked about the fact that looking at fiscal federalism, and I'm asking if this is where we are to begin, if we are talking about the issue of fiscal federalism, restructuring, whatever name that has been given to it, is this the way to go? Is it the states that are to kickstart that process as it is?
Any journey of 1,000 miles, it's a popular saying, begins with a step. And on many occasions, we have found out that there are lots of people who are within the political circle that have always talked about the need for the federal government to at least understand how a properly federated system functions. But because many of the things we have here is such that the federal government appears to be larger than life, please permit me allude. In 2018, after the killings in Logo and Goma, the State Assembly of Benue State enacted a proper law to ban open grazing. A group of cattle headers came on television and said that can happen. We have a number of southern states that have actually promulgated a law or enacted it that we cannot permit open grazing. Then the next thing I hear is that state governors cannot. Let's look at this. The FIRS is only an agency of government. And I'm beginning to wonder how much powers it feels it has to take an entire state with an executive governor and a properly enacted law as if it doesn't exist. So it is in our nature not to do that. So I think that, one, this is going to begin to check the federal government for them to rethink certain areas. For instance, we're talking about what is contained in the exclusive, concurrent, and residual list.
Absolutely.
This is one of the ways for the federal government to understand that I think we're overreaching ourselves. Let's begin to shed more of our weight. Let me say this. In properly federated structure, the federal government has care or oversight functions or control of three major areas. Immigration is one, security is another, then the currency of the country. These are three pivots. If we check properly federated systems, every other is either shared or is entirely left to the states and the local government respectively. So I think that the federal government should learn a little humility and try to get its lawyers to do more work in understanding the provisions of the law, because if we are to have proper conversations around building this democracy that is bedeviled by lots of challenges, it begins from towing the line of the law, and this is one amongst many others.
Perhaps this is why some have said that there are anomalies with regards to our tax administration, and perhaps this is presenting the opportunity for us to begin to look critically into it, because the tax, the VAT that we are talking about, used to be the sales tax of several years ago.
And it was even less than this. Don't forget that about 2 years ago was when it came to about 7.5%. It used to be less than that. Now, it may not be at this moment about what the tax is called. It's just about proper collections and efficient use of the taxes, which is where the conversation should go. So we'd have to move the conversation first from the collection, which is beginning to get proper definition, as we've seen. And I think that Wike said something that is very significant.
Right.
I think the VAT collected by Kano the past calendar year was about 2.8 billion. And Kano kept 2.8 billion after the allocation was actually, dismembered to all the states. I think that what has become very fundamental is for states to begin to look critically at areas where it can build capacities. And I don't want people to say, what's going to happen to other states? They are going to suffer, money is going to come to. I say, hold your breath. The reason Lagos and other regions have been able to attract such investments that have enabled them gather so much VAT is simply because they've created enabling environment for businesses to thrive. You permit me go to Kano. Some years ago, there was supposed to be a beauty pageant basically in the north, but certain persons raised issue that you cannot have such beauty pageants. Now, investment that would have come to Kano, Abuja, with respect to entertainment won't go there any longer because of the position. So I think that's what we must understand first, is that when we make decisions, our decisions in life goes to hurt us. Now let's look at certain agricultural practices in the southwest or in the south-south or the southeast. For instance, pig is some kind of meat that is consumed in this region. Yes. And there are people who own big farms and pay taxes. In Islam, it's not permitted. And the much I know about the noble religion is that when you don't eat something, you don't profit from it. Right. So such taxes that are also paid for the rearing of pigs go into part of the money shared by states that are practicing Sharia law. Then I begin to question the logic of not consuming certain things, but yet you're profiting from it by getting it. So I think that we should stop deceiving ourselves here. This is a very bold front taken by the Rivers State Govt, and I want to urge every state, not just the southern states. There are northern states that are making profit. For instance, you're talking about...
But we see them raising eyebrows.
No, there is absolute... Excuse me, it comes from a lack of understanding and the unwillingness to develop capacity. Let me look at the issue of free education. After the First Republic, it became what the likes of Awo decided to do for the Southwest because they believe education opened doors, it creates development. As of the time Awo was giving such things as free education, what were other governors or other regional leaders doing? That's the question. Now, the South has been able to develop capacity over time. And the gains it is making now from many investments it sees is being able to understand that opening up yourselves to other dimensions can actually create profit. And that's what many of the states in the north have done. Let's look at this. For the first three republics, Nigeria was having a topsy-turvy experience in terms of politics. At the beginning of the Fourth Republic, of all the things that are important for development, many northern states said they wanted Sharia law, which wasn't supposed to be their beginning point in terms of the problems we have had before coming into the Fourth Republic. Right. So you'd find out that whilst the South happens to be making gains and thinking out of the box in building capacity, expanding opportunities for investment, and also training our peoples for more knowledge, becoming great resource, they not fail to go the way of Sharia law, not understanding itself that Sharia is not meant to hold it. Now let's look at the likes of Dubai and many Arab countries. Egypt is also one. We cannot be holier than the Pope. These are countries that are far developed than Nigeria, and yet they are Muslim countries, but their economies are opening up. If anybody hasn't traveled to Dubai, if you have the capacity or financial wherewithal, then you need to go there. It's a Muslim country. So basically for me, I think the North must rethink the destiny it has chosen for itself so that this cries wouldn't come again, because there's nothing we can do. I say again, for every of the FIRS statement made yesterday, there was no reference to the superiority of the Constitution in this matter. There were just issues raised, and I don't think we need that at the moment.
Right. Now, the question on the lips of some experts at this point is the capacity of states to collect revenue, as we have seen the FIRS do over the years. Okay.
So when you talk about capacity, it is a very interesting statement to make. When you say capacity, is it that there are no bank accounts that such monies will be paid into? Because capacity is about, do you have the infrastructure or the provisions made for the seamless collection of the taxes? If they don't have, they can learn from Lagos, how Lagos has been able to manage our tax collection scheme over the years. They can also learn from Ogun State, another investment hub that has been collecting taxes from, many people that have established businesses there over the years. I think it is not about the question of collection. We have to take the conversation into the domain of, we agree now Of course, we know that the appellate court will be hearing this suit sooner than later.
Absolutely.
And if at all the decision doesn't go the way of the FIRS, we'll likely see it end at the Supreme Court. But the conversation we should moot at the moment is the responsibility of states, if the power eventually rests on their table, to properly now administer these humongous amounts of money that will be coming to them. We're talking about a Lagos, a Rivers. For instance, now Lagos accounts for about 65 to 70% of the tax collected, VAT collected in Nigeria. Now you ask me, what are states in the Northwest doing? Please, let's not give excuses to the incidences of insecurity. Before we came to this stage, people should go check the collections that they have been making before this time. And you find out that before the insecurity situation gets to this point, many states of the North have not been able to think out of the box using their leadership and perhaps state capacities to be able to do something. Let's look at Kaduna, for instance. Kaduna is bedeviled by problem, but within the last couple of years, Kaduna has attracted an investment to the tune of $2.6 billion US. That is Kaduna. Now let us see what ties itself to the success that Kaduna, a state as equally befuddled by problems and many others. Kaduna has passed, as I speak to you, the Child Rights Act. In fact, the violence against persons, Kaduna has also passed that. Many of the states that are suffering from financial problems have refused to pass the Child Rights Act. These are things that the international community gives consideration to, and the paperwork that people doing feasibility studies to establish businesses also consider before they come to your place. So a place that somebody intends to spend about $200 billion US, and you find out that the girl child is not protected, you find out that many women are subjected to violence, you find out that the social context or the social situation is not favorable, knowing full well that women are an essential part of the economy of any country, you will not find it easy to bring your money there. So while Kaduna, a state in the Northwest that is also challenged, is making profit in investment, and obviously will be getting VAT from those investments coming in, others won't make so because certain steps are not being taken. So these are about the policies and the decisions you make in a country that is supposed to be secular, but you're refusing to toe the proper line.
Now, something that you have been mentioning that I want for you to perhaps expatiate on is the responsibilities of governments, state governments now, if they are now saddled with the responsibility of collecting taxes, how they are going to administer it for the betterment of their states.
Fantastic. Let's begin with this way. The conversation about taxes and the state developing capacity. I was here some 4 or 5 years ago to talk about when when Lagos State Government had a verdict in its favor against the federal government for the collection of this same consumption tax. And I said that the need for us to push more for accountability is very needful. Some of the little changes we've seen in government is as a result of the cumulative effort of people who believe that government can serve people better. So we are not going to rest on our oars. The things we'll do again is to examine what comes in, one. Then to begin to say perhaps these are areas on it, because leadership is not a one-man show. There are areas where the people in government and those that are working directly with them may not be able to see. So our position on this side of the divide is to say, fantastically well, you've collected this amount. We know that in the previous year you used X amount. You could also spread it to areas B, C, E or B, C, D, because we believe there are other needs. So what we will do is to serve as a watchdog and to help provide needed information that can help governments across the state to be more responsible, having had the power to collect these taxes.
Now, because that is one major issue for a lot of persons.
Correct, yes, please.
Because when you look at how we have performed in terms of accountability, holding government to account, you already know how we have performed if you are to rate us.
That's true.
And so then who watches the watchdog?
Fine.
Who ensures that every loopholes that might be found is blocked, secured, corruption not taking place as we speak? In
the first place, I want to say a big thank you to this organization. I said 5 years ago you've been having a conversation. And fate has made it that I'm here again to talk about it. That is one of the ingredients of progressive democratic policies. The media occupies the fourth estate of the realm. By implication, it is the government of the people, holding forth the space that many people perhaps do not have the opportunity to get onto. It therefore means that if your media house, as we have it now, continues with the conversation and bring in proper-minded and well-intentioned people as myself who can speak to the issues without fear or favor. That is an addition to the success we hope to make. Then at the same time, not reneging and asking questions, because one thing is to have people like us come into your studio, another is to also bring policymakers, opinion shapers within government to also come and explain the collections and explain the administration of what has been collected and explain prospect for what they want to collect in the future. I think that the consistent engagement on both sides of the divide can enhance better delivery of governance to the people, can enhance better responsibility by people in government, can better enhance the relationship between the leadership of the country and those that are being led, so that we can have the type of governance we've always hoped and prayed for.
Absolutely, and that's a fine place to leave the conversation this morning. Public Affairs Analyst Adeni Kunu, thank you for your time.
I'm grateful for the opportunity. Thank you.
Right.